On the night of our 5th anniversary, Pablo came home smelling strongly of fish. He said, "Julia, let's try an open marriage." I didn't hesitate. I immediately agreed. Later, the topic rich heir falls for a fish seller girl shot to the top of the trending list. Pablo's mother called me to the old family house to lecture me. "You can't lay eggs. And you can't even keep hold of a man. Julia, you're a complete failure as a woman." I nodded. "Oh, okay." Later, Pablo got tired of playing the wandering rogue and called me late at night. "Wife, it's my birthday today. Why aren't you home?" I bit my lip to suppress my breathing. Oh. After hanging up, I kicked David off the bed with one foot. "Are you a dog or something? Why do you bite so hard?" Chapter 1. Let the young master carry the medal of the first time, so he will remember me whenever he sees it. The picture attached was a small square cut from a blue floral bedsheet. Right in the center was a dark reddish stain. Someone in the comments asked, "Didn't you say before that there would be no future between you two? Was it really worth giving yourself like that?" The blogger replied, "True love never asks whether it's worth it. I would rather have the fireworks of a single moment than the fading warmth of ashes." He promised that after we separate, he'll arrange the best restoration surgery for me. By then, I'll completely let go of this past and find an ordinary, reliable man to live out the rest of my life quietly. One follower left a moved comment. "After reading your story, I've decided not to back down either. Tonight I'm going to meet the man I know I can't have. But I still hope you and the young master will end up together." The blogger replied with a string of hugging emojis. "You have to dare to love and hate. Even if you shatter, you'll still be beautiful pieces." Many people in the comments pitied her. Even more people scolded her. The blogger never responded again. I turned off my phone screen and casually set it on the table. Across from me, Pablo's personal assistant Ava spoke urgently. "Madam, you saw it, right? That woman is completely shameless. You need to warn her and make her delete the post and apologize. You absolutely can't go easy on her." I lifted the slightly cooled coffee, stirring it gently without replying. Chapter 2. That woman is acting pure while doing the opposite. Who does she think she's fooling? Treating that membrane like some kind of bargaining chip. She just wants to force her way into the position of wife. Pablo would never. "Why are you so worked up?" I interrupted Ava. "She's bragging about her own life. What does that have to do with you?" Ava choked on her words, her face flushing red. "I'm just upset on your behalf. Tricks like that are disgusting. Most people wouldn't stoop that low." Seeing that I said nothing, she continued in a persuasive tone. "If you personally deal with this trouble, Pablo will definitely see who truly cares about him and who can help him maintain his dignity. I'm just a small person. At times like this I can only stand by and feel anxious for you. I really feel wronged on your behalf." My fingertips brushed the rim of the cup as I laughed softly. "Last winter in the underground parking garage, you cried to Pablo saying you didn't want to remain the woman behind him forever. The dashcam recorded everything. So what is it now? Demoted from leading lady to stagehand. But you still can't give up acting? If you want to borrow my knife to clear the stage for you, at least wipe your own backside clean first." Ava's face turned pale instantly, and tears quickly gathered in her eyes. "I know you won't believe anything I say now, but I truly don't have any inappropriate feelings for Pablo anymore. You and Pablo have been together for so many years. Your relationship shouldn't be destroyed by a woman like that. A girl like her has nothing except youth. Pablo is just enjoying something new. After all, you're the rightful Mrs. Pablo." "Oh, who cares?" "Miss Ava, next time we meet, remember to call me President Julia." I stood up and walked past her, patting her stiff shoulder. "Put this coffee on your tab. Watching you act is exhausting for me too." Behind me came the sound of a cup shattering. I didn't look back. I pushed open the door and stepped into the sunlight. Chapter 3. When I opened the door, the house was filled with the aroma of food. Aunt Chen, the housekeeper, came out of the kitchen carrying soup, her face full of smiles. "Julia is back." Perfect timing. The dishes were just finished. "Today I made your favorite steamed coral trout, crab roe tofu, and the braised pork with eggs that Sir likes." I hummed in response and glanced at the table. 8 or 9 of the dishes were actually to my taste. I pulled a stack of cash from my wallet and handed it to her. "Thank you for the hard work." Auntie, today is a special day. You can go home early. She wiped her hands on her apron and happily took the money. Thank you, Julia. You're really too kind. Sir is truly blessed to have married you, beautiful, capable, and considerate. Happy wedding anniversary to you and Sir. May you stay harmonious and grow old together. I curved my lips into a faint smile. I didn't respond and simply sat down to eat quietly. Childhood sweethearts. Perfectly matched families, this marriage had once been wrapped in the skin of a fairy tale. Until Pablo's birthday last year. I canceled my afternoon meeting and drove to Pablo's company to give him a surprise. In the corner of the underground garage, the lighting was dim. Ava was pinned against the car door by Pablo. Dressing like that. Aren't you just asking me to do you? Ava breathed rapidly, choking softly. Pablo, I don't want to sneak around like this every time. Pablo sneered. Isn't sneaking around exactly what you like? The two of them staggered into the back seat together. The car door slammed shut, and the car began rocking ambiguously. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white. On the passenger seat lay the sapphire brooch I had personally designed, intertwined stars and moon. I didn't know how long passed before the ghost finally stopped shaking. Only when their taillights disappeared at the exit of the garage did I slowly release my stiff hands. The car was deathly silent. I picked up the beautifully wrapped gift box and opened it, taking out the card that read "Together year after year." I slowly, very slowly, tore it into pieces. Then I picked up my phone and called my assistant. That star and moon brooch Mr. Lee admired at the studio last time, pack it up tomorrow and send it to his residence. The fairy tale shattered, but it also made everything crystal clear. A heart can break, but accounts must remain precise. I called my elder sister, Diana. I studied art and jewelry design to expand my reputation, becoming the family's brightest public symbol. While my elder sister never married, seized real power, and became the iron-blooded heir of the family. Sis, if I divorce Pablo, will it greatly affect the family? There was a moment of silence on the other end. It will, but not much. Just a scratch on the surface, it won't damage the bones. Then, I paused. How long would it take you to short Pablo's family? The voice on the receiver instantly shifted from lazy to excited. My dear princess, I'm glad you're finally thinking like this. A year and a half. For an old aristocratic family like theirs. You can't rush it, you have to take it bite by bite. All right. My voice was calm and steady. Losing the one you love might only keep you awake tonight. But losing money, reputation, and social status, that's what makes someone wake up in regret for the rest of their life. Chapter 4. The fish was fresh and the tofu tender. I ate attentively. At 9:30, the door lock clicked. Pablo came home. He smelled of alcohol and the salty fishy odor unique to a seafood market. It made my stomach churn. Last year he had smelled of white flowers. At that time he froze at the door, his Adam's apple rolling nervously as he waited for me to explode. But I had simply thrown that coat into the trash. I didn't ask anything. Some filth needs no questioning, only disposal. Pablo tossed his coat aside and didn't mention the anniversary. Haven't eaten yet? Waiting for me? I already ate. The leftovers are in the kitchen. I turned a page of my book without even raising my eyes. Pablo walked over and leaned his hands on the table, bending down close. There was an unbearable desire to share in his tone. Do you know why I'm so late today? I took Helen home. She insisted on showing me the new goods she just got. He licked his lips, his tone sticky. The water in the plastic basin was murky and smelled fishy. She reached in to grab something, and the fish thrashed violently. Water splashed all over her, and her skirt became completely transparent. For a moment I remembered the early days of our marriage. Pablo wearing an apron in the kitchen making fish soup for me, clumsily holding up a spoon and saying, "It's my first time cooking this. You're not allowed to laugh at me." Chapter 5. I picked up the glass of water beside me and took a sip. Oh, so did the fish die in the end? Pablo's expression stiffened, as if he had just been slapped. He suddenly straightened up. Ever since the last time, when I neither cried nor made a scene and simply moved to sleep in a separate room calmly, Pablo had started finding different ways to act disgusting. He stubbornly believed that the reason I hadn't mentioned divorce was because I still had feelings for him. So again and again he crossed the line, wanting to see me lose control, wanting to tear apart my calm facade and force me to break down. He had a pathological craving to fill the gap of his own infidelity with my suffering. Julia, we're all adults. There's no need to hide certain things. I think we could try an open marriage. When Pablo said this, there was a ridiculous openness in his eyes. As if what he had proposed were some fair and forward-thinking grand idea. I nodded immediately without hesitation. Sure. Pablo's pupils suddenly shrank. My easy agreement had once again exceeded the script in his mind. That's all the reaction you have? Julia, do you even have a heart? I closed my book and looked up at him. What kind of reaction do you want? Crying? Making a scene? Threatening suicide? If you're worried I might change my mind, just have a lawyer draft an agreement and I'll sign it. I'm busy. I don't have time to play games with you. Pablo looked as if he had been stabbed and stepped closer step by step. Busy with what? Guarding this empty house and pretending to be noble? I'm telling you, even if it's open, you'd better behave and remain Mrs. Pablo. Don't go out and embarrass me. If anyone dares touch you, I'll kill him. I didn't speak. I simply stared at Pablo coldly. When he failed to get the reaction he wanted, his reason finally snapped. One hand grabbed my waist roughly, his lips trying to press against my neck. I'm your man. Touching you is perfectly natural. I didn't hesitate. With one hand I grabbed the jade ashtray from the table. I had specially bought it at auction for his birthday the year before. Back then Pablo had said, "My wife chose it, so I'll use it every day." With a dull thud, bang, Pablo's body swayed once. Then he collapsed straight to the ground, not moving. The world finally became quiet. Chapter 6. I stood there. The place on my wrist where he had grabbed me was already red. Pablo would probably never understand that once some people give up completely, even hatred is a waste of emotion. I kicked Pablo once. No reaction. I went to the bathroom and took a thorough shower, using more than half a bottle of body wash. Then I dragged Pablo onto the living room carpet and arranged him into a posture that looked like he had simply fallen asleep naturally. Dragging him back to the bedroom would be too much trouble. This place was fine. He wasn't going to die anyway. After finishing everything, I returned to my room, locked the door, and slept unexpectedly well. The next morning I was awakened by groaning coming from the living room. Why am I sleeping here? Pablo's voice was hoarse as he held his head in pain. I leaned against the doorframe with a glass of water in my hand. You forgot? When you came back last night you said your head hurt terribly. You collapsed onto the carpet and fell asleep. No matter how much I called you, you wouldn't wake up. I paused, then added, you were snoring too. It kept me from sleeping. Pablo froze. Subconsciously he touched the back of his head, his eyes full of confusion and doubt. Really? He struggled to stand up but fell back down from dizziness. Yes. I nodded and walked past him. Looks like you really exhausted yourself. In the future, when you're busy with work, take care of your health and don't work too hard. Pablo was still groaning and holding his head when the phone beside him suddenly lit up. The name Helen flashed wildly on the screen. Pablo glanced at me deliberately before swiping to answer and turning on speaker. What now? His tone sounded impatient, but his eyes were locked tightly on me. Chapter 7. A sweet, syrupy voice came from the other end of the phone. Brother, sorry, I didn't wake anyone in your house so early, did I? You were really amazing last night. Brother, my waist is still sore and weak. I can barely walk now. She dragged out the last note. It's just that you seemed a bit too eager. You didn't even wear that thing, and everything inside got messy. I'm a little scared. With so many seeds, what if the strongest little seed sprouts? I raised an eyebrow slightly. This acting was exaggerated, like something copied from a third-rate romance drama, but it seemed this one wasn't as harmless as the image she portrayed on social media. Her tone suddenly shifted, every word dripping with insinuation. Brother, could you buy me one of those morning after pills? When you come over I'll thank you properly. The impatience on Pablo's face gradually faded. This kind of crude and straightforward admiration and dependence greatly satisfied his vanity. Got it. He glanced at me, seeing that I had no reaction at all. His tone suddenly turned indulgent. Be good. I'll be right there. Pablo hung up and struggled to stand, completely forgetting that his head was still injured. Just as he bent down to pick up his car keys, my phone rang, a bright, distinctive ringtone. I glanced at the screen and answered directly. You lied. A young man's voice flowed into my ear. Like melted honey, sweet and slightly aggrieved. You said you'd come back. When I woke up and couldn't find you, I cried so much the pillow got wet. My tone remained calm. I'll come over in a bit. He leaned closer to the microphone, his voice carrying a damp hint of intimacy. Then hurry. Sister, I think I caught a little cold last night. Touch me and see if I have a fever. Before he finished speaking, I hung up. Pablo froze mid-movement and suddenly turned his head to stare at me. Whose call was that? I picked up my bag and walked past him toward the door. Just a little puppy waiting for me to go back and feed him. Chapter 8. I pushed open the door of the studio. David was curled up in a beanbag chair in the corner. Like a large abandoned dog. I had experienced the temper of this young master many years ago. On the night of our university graduation dance, he dared to block me backstage. His hair was slicked back, his ears red. Yet he spoke with utmost seriousness. Julia, wait until I grow up. Later, when I married Pablo. The emo posts he wrote on social media were practically performance art. Roses die at dawn. The universe has entered an ice age. My solar system has lost its warmth. Today's fortune, suitable for sinking into the Mariana Trench and becoming a quiet piece of sediment. I found it amusing, just a child throwing a tantrum. Later, because he caused too much trouble, his mixed-race movie star mother took him back to France to study. With his striking appearance and contrasting temperament, he quickly became famous in the fashion world and turned into a highly sought-after model in backstage photos from fashion shows. Around his neck, wrist, or ear, he often wore jewelry produced by my studio. Fashion critics even called him the unofficial ambassador. Now that he had returned to the country and learned about Pablo's little scandal, he eagerly volunteered himself as a live model again. David looked up when he heard me enter, his eyes instantly lighting up. Sister. I ignored him and walked straight to the workbench, checking the prototype of a body chain. You called and said all that nonsense. What do you want? David leaned closer, bringing with him a warm, sweet scent. He was more than a head taller than me. Yet now he bent down deliberately and rested his chin on my shoulder. What nonsense? I don't remember. My fingertip pressed against his forehead, pushing him away slightly. Speak properly. And I told you before, no incense like that in the studio. It interferes with my judgment of gemstone brilliance. Oh, he pouted and straightened up, but his gaze remained glued to my face. Then help me check if I really have a fever. My head feels a little dizzy. My palm touched his forehead. It was cool, no sign of fever at all. I withdrew my hand, too lazy to expose his childish trick. David removed his robe and stood beneath the studio spotlight. His golden brown natural curls were a little messy, casually pushed back to reveal a full forehead and features so handsome they were almost bewitching. When the chain touched his waist, David shivered. It's cold. Endure it. I focused on wrapping the chain around his narrow waist. David cooperatively inhaled, tightening his abdomen to make it easier for me to work. When the chain brushed across his chest, he complained softly. It's freezing my nipples. Chapter 9. My movements paused for a moment, and my gaze instinctively swept over the spot David pointed to. Be professional, David. I am professional, he muttered softly. It attacked me suddenly. Look, sister, aren't they red from the cold? I glanced up at him. He immediately fell silent and stood straight, while adjusting the chain ring beneath his chest. He suddenly grabbed my wrist, the thin calluses of his fingertips brushing against my skin. I stopped. Does it hurt? He shook his head and guided my palm to the area beneath the left side of his chest. His heartbeat was heavy and rapid. David looked innocent. It's beating so fast. Did sister touch some kind of switch? There's no switch there. If your heart rate is irregular, I suggest seeing a doctor. Only the designer can cure it. The design is too charming, it's making the wearer lose control. I withdrew my hand and picked up the digital caliper to measure the data. It could be an early symptom of hyperthyroidism. I suggest a medical checkup. Raise your arms and hold for 15 seconds. David. After the fitting was complete, I stepped back 2 paces to examine my work. The cold platinum chains wrapped around David's full chest muscles and narrow waist, extending downward along the V-lines of his abdomen. His body perfectly supported the design, even giving it a more vibrant and wild vitality. and that handsome face, mixed with innocence and desire, was slightly flushed. It pushed the sense of contrast to its extreme. All right, that's it for today. David immediately leaned closer. Is there a reward? The reward is that you weren't fired for causing trouble. He pretended not to hear, leaned forward, and quickly kissed my cheek. I frowned at him. No kissing. Okay, okay. David replied immediately, raising both hands in surrender. I began unclasping the body chain from him. Suddenly he grabbed my wrist again, the sleeve slipped down, revealing a patch of red marks. David's gaze darkened instantly. He hit you? I tried to pull back, but he held tighter. Before I could answer, David lowered his head and gently kissed the marked skin. When he looked up again, his eyes had turned obedient once more. Don't be angry, sister. I don't mind being the other man. I mind. I pulled my hand away. You can leave now. The studio door closed. After a moment, I clicked my tongue softly. What a troublesome large dog. Chapter 10. After David left, the studio returned to silence. I walked to the window and pushed it open a crack. The cold night breeze poured in, dispersing the faint sweetness that had been distracting me. I put on my magnifying visor and gloves, then picked up the engraving knife. The world quickly shrank to the tiny space beneath the magnifying lens. Only lines, curves, and the subtle changes of light and shadow. Outside, the sky gradually shifted from pitch black to deep indigo, then slowly brightened with the pale light of dawn. When the final chain ring was reassembled, I turned off the spotlight and removed the visor. My neck and shoulders throbbed with soreness, and my eyes were dry and aching. But looking at the body chain on the workbench, shimmering softly in the first light of morning, a pure sense of satisfaction overwhelmed all physical exhaustion. It was more dreamy, more beautiful, and closer to the bold design I had imagined. I placed it into the safe and tidied the workbench. My phone was charging quietly nearby. The screen lit up, showing several new messages. After checking the schedule my assistant had sent regarding Pablo's arrangements, a piece of entertainment news popped up. Hashtag rich heir involved with fish seller girl? Intimate garage photos exposed hashtag. The attached image was a blurry snapshot. Pablo's Rolls-Royce Ghost license plate could barely be recognized, and a petite figure was half embraced by Pablo and pushed into the passenger seat. The girl's face was unclear, but the slightly faded floral dress she wore was quite recognizable. I raised an eyebrow and tapped it open. Sure enough, the comment section of the exposé was already blazing with discussion. Holy crap, Pablo? Is this real? I know this girl. She sells seafood at the market across from my house. She's not even that pretty. Didn't expect her to have such skills. Where's the wife? Come say something. Have some decency. Maybe the wife is already suffering enough. What's suffering? Rich people's marriages are basically open anyway. Did you see the wife say anything? Still though, Pablo's taste really isn't picky. I swiped away the notification and opened another app. As expected, Helen's little ramblings had updated. Chapter 11. This time it was a longer and more winding little essay. Many sisters have sent me private messages asking if I'm afraid. Honestly, I am. I'm afraid I'm not worthy of him. Afraid I won't fit into his world. Afraid that when I wake up I'll find this is just a fragile dream. Today the young master took me to a very expensive restaurant, but I couldn't even use the knife and fork properly. He laughed and said my clumsy look was cute, and personally cut the steak for me. I know I embarrassed myself and made the young master lose face, but he only patted my head and said he liked me just the way I am, so genuine, not like some people who always hold themselves so stiffly, fake like a delicate doll, even calculating the angles of their smiles and tears, cold and lifeless, without a trace of real humanity. I know he was comforting me. With a family background like his, he must need a wife who can hold up appearances, unlike me, who has nothing to offer except this body and all of my love. But sometimes I still feel uneasy, like a thief who stole someone else's treasure. I hope one day she will understand that men are not meant to be tied down by someone's side. Once the heart has left, what's the use of keeping an empty shell? The picture attached showed two overlapping hands. On the man's slender finger, the wedding ring was glaring. The comment section was lively. Many people scolded her for being delusional as a mistress and suggested she be admitted to a hospital. Some asked if she was posting abstract nonsense, but quite a few followers supported her. Still wearing the wedding ring? Is he deliberately provoking the wife? The young master is so ruthless, I love it. Sob, sob. I feel sorry for her. She's so pure and kind. Still thinking about others. Is the wife dead or something? How can she tolerate this? How cold must the wife be to push such a good man away? Young master, hurry up and divorce her and marry this girl. Gentle and virtuous girls like her deserve it. This Helen clearly understood the tricks of a pretentious coquette. She seemed self-deprecating, but every sentence subtly elevated herself while belittling the wife. She portrayed Pablo as a pitiful man searching for true love in a cold marriage, and she herself became the selfless angel rescuing him from misery. The tactics weren't particularly clever, some were even crude and impatient. But for Pablo, who was drowning in sweet attention and whose vanity was overflowing, it was more than enough. I drove home and walked into the bathroom to take a shower. The warm water washed away fatigue and metallic dust, and my mind became clearer. Chapter 12. For the following period of time, Pablo seemed determined to carry out the open marriage to the end. Tonight there's a gathering, some friends. I'm taking Helen along so she can see the world a bit. Pablo adjusted his collar in the mirror at the entrance. Casually, he added, she's never been to that kind of occasion before. She's so nervous. Keeps pulling me aside to ask questions. It's quite amusing. I glanced at him, my eyes brushing over the brownish kiss mark on the side of his neck. Have fun. Pablo's hand paused while fixing his collar. He stared at me through the mirror. You're not even going to ask what kind of gathering it is? Who's going? Is that necessary? I turned a page of the magazine, my tone calm. Pablo turned around and strode over to me, snatching the magazine from my hands. Julia, you're not even pretending anymore, are you? I looked up at him. Wasn't the open marriage your suggestion? What exactly are you dissatisfied with? Pablo choked on his words, his face turning dark. He threw the magazine onto the sofa. Fine, very fine. Julia, you really are something. Thank you for the compliment. Pablo slammed the door and stormed out. I picked up the wrinkled magazine and slowly smoothed it out. Then continued reading my finance section. Policy trends, merger progress. These were the things I actually cared about. As for Pablo and the clumsy drama he was directing, it was hardly worth mentioning. Pablo threw several more tantrums afterward. He deliberately had the driver deliver nourishing soup that Helen had supposedly made herself, exaggerating how clumsily she had cooked it in her small rented apartment with an electric pot just for him. I nodded. Be careful of food poisoning. Sometimes he would deliberately turn on speaker while answering calls, so I could hear Helen complaining that he had hurt her the night before, or bragging about what gifts Pablo had given her. Even if they weren't expensive, they were from brother's heart. Usually I simply picked up my phone and walked onto the balcony, calling my sister or my lawyer, urging them to move faster. Pablo's madness was becoming environmental noise pollution. This complete, almost humiliating, indifference was far more unbearable to Pablo than any crying or argument. He grew increasingly restless and irritable. He even went to the company less often. It seemed that only when he was with Helen could he find the unconditional admiration he craved. Chapter 13. Pablo, that useless piece of trash, didn't go to the company again. Third time this week. My older sister pushed the tablet toward me. The stock price of Pablo's company was a sea of miserable red. He doesn't even have the strength to throw a proper punch. He's already driven himself mad first. She sighed and tapped the table with her fingertip. Back then I thought since he was older he'd be more mature. Better than that kid David. Now I see I was blind. I took a light sip of tea. A person's character has nothing to do with age. I really can't understand it. My sister's tone sharpened, clearly angered by the discussions online. That useless Pablo actually chose someone like that? The entire internet is laughing at you for losing to a fish seller. I can't swallow this humiliation. I set the teacup down, my gaze calm. Sis, you should be happy. The crazier they become, the more advantageous it is for us. As for me, trash is trash, and gemstones are gemstones. If he jumps into a garbage can, it means he's going bankrupt. Not that I'm depreciating. When have you ever seen a gemstone needing to prove its worth more than garbage? I opened my email interface and handed the screen to my sister. A few days ago, Helen had posted a new update on her social media. It showed Pablo's sleeping face, The background was Pablo's office. On the corner of his desk lay an internal financing agreement from Pablo's company. When I saw it, I almost laughed. Could it be that this Helen was actually a commercial spy sent by Pablo's company's competitors? I immediately enlarged the part of the agreement in the photo and took screenshots. Then I packaged the screenshots together with the original photo and sent them to the private emails of every director of Pablo's company, as well as the old patriarch of the Pablo family. Attached message. The only son of Pablo's company uses corporate secrets to win a beauty smile. After dinner, my sister and I walked out of Lao Dezhuang. Her phone rang. She answered and raised an eyebrow. The old man got so angry he had a heart attack. They've already taken him to the hospital. You're ruthless as always. The old man of the Pablo family hates nothing more than family scandals going public. Before she finished speaking, my phone screen lit up. Caller ID, Pablo's mother. I smiled at my sister. The one who likes to put on airs has arrived. Chapter 14. Pablo's mother spoke in her usual condescending tone. Come to the old residence this afternoon. I glanced at my fully packed schedule. I had an appointment with an heir supplier that afternoon. I have an important meeting this afternoon. If there's something, just say it over the phone. Her voice instantly turned cold. What meeting could possibly be more important than family matters? Now the whole city is talking about this scandal and you still have the mind to attend meetings? Come here immediately. The call ended abruptly. I put down my phone. Adding more fuel to the fire would be fine, but there was no need to rush. After meeting with the heir supplier, I arrived 2 hours late. I pushed open the door of the tea room in the Pablo family's old residence. Without waiting for the butler to announce me, I walked straight to the main seat, the rosewood armchair that Pablo's mother always sat in. Then I sat down. When she walked in, the carefully maintained expression on her face instantly froze. Julia, is that your seat? Get up. I didn't move. I poured myself a cup of tea. The temperature was perfect. Look at the mess you've made. Pablo's mother threw a stack of printed papers in front of me, letting a lowly fish seller ride over our heads and cause trouble. You've completely disgraced the Pablo family. You can't even produce a child. And you can't keep your man. Julia, you are a complete failure as a woman. Her gaze scraped over me like knives. I swallowed a bite of tea pastry and answered obediently. Oh, she had probably expected me to defend myself, cry, or promise something, but since she didn't get the reaction she wanted, she became anxious. What kind of attitude is that? If you weren't so useless, unable to keep a man's heart, would something like this even happen? You can't even control your own husband. What kind of daughter-in-law of the Pablo family are you? I laughed softly. Of course, an illegitimate daughter who rose to the top. With vision as narrow as a gutter, her son causes trouble. Her husband nearly collapses from anger, and all she knows how to do is scold others for not keeping the dog tied. I truly can't learn the skill you had back then, stealing your own sister's fiancé. After all, not everyone is good at handling trash. Pablo's mother reacted as if someone had stepped on her tail. You. I didn't give her the chance to explode and continued delivering the blow. Pablo isn't a dog I failed to keep tied. He's a son you failed to raise properly. If you really care about the Pablo family's reputation, you should control him first. Don't let him go around feeding fish with company secrets. Pablo's mother trembled with rage. She grabbed a teacup, ready to throw it. I stepped back and reminded her with a smile. Careful, too much anger harms the body. Her pupils shrank suddenly. Her face turned from white to green, but she couldn't utter another word. Finally, she collapsed backward. The butler cried out in panic. Doctor, call the doctor. I stood up and straightened my clothes, looking down at Pablo's mother's miserable state. Don't worry, the hospital should still have empty beds available. Chapter 15. Pablo learned from his mother about my insolent behavior. That very night he actually came back, reeking strongly of alcohol. He blocked the bedroom door and demanded an explanation. So you're satisfied now? You made my mother that angry. You're mistaken. The one who angered her was you. I was drying my hair and tried to walk past him, but Pablo grabbed my wrist, gripping hard. Julia, what exactly do you want? That's the question I should ask you. An open marriage, you proposed it, and I agreed. So what exactly are you making a fuss about now? Pablo was momentarily speechless, then became angry out of embarrassment. I can't stand that superior look on your face. Like you're living even better without me. That's the truth. You. Pablo suddenly lowered his voice, a malicious smile appearing on his face. Fine. You're impressive, but Julia, don't think I don't know about you and that little model. So Pablo had indeed heard some rumors, but his brain, soaked in alcohol and vanity, could never believe that I would actually do anything substantial. He only assumed it was a tactic to provoke him. David? Just a brat. You're only using him to make me angry. Pablo's tone was frivolous. Can he satisfy you? I hear the modeling circle is pretty messy. Be careful you don't catch something. He was obsessed with provoking me in the most vulgar way. What he didn't realize was that he had long lost the qualification to affect my emotions. I looked out the window at the gradually extinguishing lights of the city. Pablo, my voice was very soft. The way you are now is really pitiful. I walked past him into the bedroom and locked the door. Outside came the sound of Pablo kicking the door angrily and cursing indistinctly. It continued for a while before finally falling silent. I leaned against the door panel and took out my phone. The screen lit up. It was a photo sent by David. He was wearing the modified body chain, standing in front of a huge floor-to-ceiling window with the dazzling city nightscape behind him. The play of light and shadow outlined the perfect lines of his body. Restraint and wildness coexisted in the chains. He looked at the camera with an innocent yet teasing gaze. His lips a vivid red. Looks like it misses you a little. Chapter 16. I looked at the photo and tapped my finger on the screen. Not focusing on your runway shows? Changed careers and become a thief? The reply came almost instantly. I'm better than a thief. Pitiful puppy. JPG. The property documents handled by Pablo have already been delivered to Diana's office. Praise me. I smiled slightly and directly called him. On the other end came David's somewhat ingratiating voice. Julia? David. Who told you to meddle? He immediately deflated. His voice lowered. I just wanted to help you. I don't need you to clean up my garbage. I walked to the window, looking at the night view of the city. There was silence on the other end for a moment. Then, am I useless? I could almost imagine his lowered eyelashes, looking wrong yet trying to endure it. Come here, I suddenly said. What? David was stunned. Now, come here. I gave him the villa address. You have 20 minutes. 18 minutes later, the doorbell rang. I opened the door. David stood outside, breathing slightly fast, his hair damp with the night breeze, his eyes astonishingly bright. I reached out, grabbed the string of his hoodie, pulled him inside, and shut the door behind us. David obediently let me press him against the wall. His Adam's apple moved, his eyes both expectant and nervous. Close your eyes. He immediately obeyed, his eyelashes trembling lightly. I didn't kiss his lips. I simply leaned closer and placed a very light touch, so light it could hardly even be called a kiss, on his eyelid. Just a brief touch. Then it was gone. David suddenly opened his eyes, staring at me in disbelief, the tips of his ears quickly turning red. Julia. Reward. I stepped back, my tone returning to calm, and also a warning. If you make decisions on your own again next time. My gaze swept over him. It won't be this simple. David froze for 2 seconds, then an overwhelming joy surged into his eyes. He almost rushed forward to hug me, but forcibly restrained himself, only daring to stare at me with shining eyes. Then, what counts as not simple? I raised my hand, tapping lightly against his chest and pushing him away from the door. That depends on whether you dare to do it again next time. I opened the door, signaling him to leave. Now, go back. David looked back every few steps as he left. The moment the door closed, I leaned against it and softly let out a breath. Chapter 17. When Pablo's mother called me to the old residence again, I didn't go. Instead, she came directly to my studio, her face glowing with unconcealed joy. Julia. Wonderful news. That fish-selling girl is lucky. She's pregnant. I looked up at her without speaking. Pablo's mother leaned closer, her tone sounding as if she were granting me a favor. When the baby is born, we'll bring it to you to raise. It's just one more mouth calling you mom, isn't it? The eldest grandson of the Pablo family must have legitimate status. You'll still be the glorious Mrs. Pablo, with a child involved. It might also make Pablo settle down, don't you think? I looked at her face shining with excitement and only found it utterly ridiculous. Pablo's company now belongs to my family. Pablo's mother's smile froze. What do you mean? I stood up. It means that your family's eldest grandson has nothing to do with me anymore. I placed the divorce agreement beside her. Have him sign it. I wasn't ruthless with the property division, ignoring the sudden explosion of screams and curses behind me. I walked out. When I returned to my apartment, I saw Pablo's car downstairs. He was leaning against the car door, several cigarette butts scattered at his feet. In his hand he held a pink gift bag with a gaudy logo. When he saw me, he immediately walked over and tried to stuff the bag into my arms. Julia, you're back? I bought you the newest model. The sales assistant said women all like this. I didn't take it. The bag fell to the ground, revealing a fluorescent pink limited edition handbag. So ugly it was striking. Pablo's expression stiffened, and he forced a smile. You don't like it? That's fine. Tomorrow I can. Pablo, I interrupted him. I gave the divorce agreement to your mother. Didn't you receive it? The smile disappeared from Pablo's face, and his voice grew impatient. Julia, how long are you going to keep this up? I've already cut things off with those women. I'll deal with that child too. From now on I'll come home every day and we'll live properly together. All right? As he spoke, he even tried to grab my hand. I stepped back and avoided him. Deal with it? I repeated the phrase, finding it extremely ironic. How exactly will you deal with it? Dispose of a person and a child like trash? Pablo was stunned into silence. I swiped my card to open the building entrance and didn't look at him again. Don't come here anymore. It's annoying to see you. Julia! He shouted from outside. I won't sign it. Don't even think about getting a divorce. Chapter 18. The only response he received was the sound of the elevator doors closing. As the elevator went up, my phone screen lit up. It was a message from David. Sister, is there some trash at the entrance that needs to be taken out? Puppy peeking, JPG. I replied, yes, it's noisy. Received. A few minutes later, I stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, watching downstairs as David, accompanied by two men in black suits, said something to Pablo. Pablo tried to argue excitedly, but the two men firmly escorted him out of the complex. The world became quiet again. My phone lit up once more. The trash has been sorted and disposed of. Reward? Sparkling eyes. JPG. The corner of my lips lifted. You're allowed to come up for a cup of coffee. The doorbell rang almost the very next second. Unbelievably fast. I opened the door. David stood outside, his hair slightly messy, a bag of coffee beans in his hand. Pretty fast, I said, stepping aside to let him in. I was afraid you'd change your mind, David said obediently as he walked in, yet his eyes quietly scanned the living room like someone inspecting his territory. Confirming there was no sign of a second person, he placed the coffee beans on the counter and leaned back against it. He won't come bother you again. Sister. David's voice lowered slightly, cautiously probing. Do you need me to help make him sign the divorce agreement? I looked at him. He immediately raised his hands, his expression innocent. I won't do anything, just provide a little motivation. No need. I walked over and picked up the bag of coffee beans. It was the brand I usually drank. That woman won't let him go. Thinking about Pablo being endlessly entangled by Helen, yet still unwilling to give up that pathetic bit of vanity. I found it ridiculous. David studied my expression and suddenly asked softly, Sister, are you sad? I raised an eyebrow at him. About whom? Pablo? Or that marriage? I opened the coffee beans, my tone calm. What emotion is needed to throw away trash? At most, I regret wasting a few years. Sister deserves the best, David said quietly, but with unusual seriousness. I didn't respond. I poured the beans into the grinder. The roar of the machine filled the quiet kitchen. David stood beside me silently watching, his gaze so focused it seemed he wanted to carve my silhouette into memory. The moment the grinding stopped, he suddenly spoke, his voice especially clear. Then, are you single now? I turned around and met David's expectant yet nervous gaze. So what? The tips of David's ears slowly turned red, but he still gathered the courage to look straight at me. So, can I officially get in line now? The aroma of coffee spread through the air. I looked at his bright eyes, which hid uneasiness beneath forced composure. Suddenly, I felt that raising a puppy was indeed far more interesting than raising a man. You can get in line. I handed David a cup of freshly brewed coffee. My fingers brushed lightly against his. But, I added, the line is very long. You'll have to wait a long time. David took the coffee and tightened his fingers slightly. No matter how long it takes, I'll wait. Chapter 19. The day Pablo signed the divorce agreement. My older sister brought a team of lawyers and cornered him in a hospital ward. Pablo's father was hospitalized. Pablo's mother was bedridden, and Helen was pregnant. Pablo's company stock had hit the daily limit down for several consecutive days. News of the broken capital chain came one after another. Only then did Pablo belatedly realize that his company had long been quietly shorted, leaving behind nothing but a corporate shell and enormous debt. My sister only left him with one sentence: sign it, and you might still keep enough money for baby formula. If you don't sign, then wait to go bankrupt with the company and prepare to end up in prison. Pablo's fingers trembled. In the end, he signed the agreement that completely kicked him out. He lost everything: his company, his wealth, his reputation, and his social status. A few days after the divorce certificate was issued, Pablo appeared downstairs at my apartment, unshaven and disheveled. Julia, I know I was wrong. Give me one more chance. We can start over. I'll pursue you again until you're willing to be with me. I stopped walking and looked at him calmly. You don't think you were wrong. You just know that now you have nothing left. Pablo tried to grab my arm, but I stepped aside and avoided him. That's not it. I really regret it. You regret losing my family's massive ship. You regret losing the identity of the heir of Pablo company that once gave you social recognition. Chapter 20. I didn't give Pablo any chance to keep harassing me. The bodyguards quickly took him away. Soon after, the news was announced that my new piece, Reforging and Freedom, had entered the finals of a top international jewelry competition. Helen seemed to have grabbed her last straw. She began frantically attacking online, posting several blurry photos taken at tricky angles of David and me in the studio. Why does the person who cheated first pretend to be the victim? She was the one being unclear with that model. That's why the young master left heartbroken. Why does she get to shine while the young master loses everything? Is that fair? That was all she was capable of. She didn't even dare to mention names. I directly uploaded a PDF online. Title: Clarification of Facts and Evidence Record regarding Mr. Pablo and his mistress's online defamation. The contents included but were not limited to dashcam footage of Pablo and Ava having sex in the car, explicit chat records Helen sent to Pablo asking for gifts, and screenshots of every post from Helen's anonymous account. The chain of logic was complete and the timeline clear. The internet's appetite for gossip was instantly ignited. This fish seller just self-destructed, using fake accusations to expose real scandals. This is hilarious. With this calmness and control, she looks less like an artist and more like a criminal investigator. At Helen's Daily Notes, stop selling fish and start writing scripts. They're terrible but wonderfully dramatic. Helen's seafood stall was boycotted by nearby residents and eventually had to close in embarrassment. Several nearby seafood shops that had long been suppressed by Pablo's influence almost set off fireworks in celebration. The quarrels between Helen and Pablo became daily occurrences. Whenever Pablo got drunk, he would shout at Helen, "You jinx! If you hadn't posted those things, I wouldn't have gotten divorced." Helen, holding her belly, refused to back down. "Blame me? You're the useless one. You couldn't even keep your wife or your money. Why didn't you call me a jinx when you slept with me? Bitch, what can you do besides spreading your legs? Pablo, you're nothing but a loser who couldn't even keep his family fortune." During a violent push, Helen slammed heavily into the corner of a table, let out a scream, and blood quickly spread beneath her. Chapter 21. By the time I heard about all of this, I was already at the award ceremony, holding the heavy trophy in my hands. A reporter pushed a microphone closer. "Miss, after winning the gold award, what are your next plans?" I adjusted the microphone. "For now, I plan to go to Europe for further study. Art requires constantly breaking boundaries." My gaze swept across the audience. David was looking up at me, his eyes bright. The reporter followed up sharply. What about your romantic life? Are you considering settling down? I smiled lightly. At the moment, I enjoy focusing on personal growth. Marriage is not my current goal. There was some murmuring in the audience. I continued. A good relationship should make people feel freer, not restrained. I believe people who share the same rhythm will naturally walk toward the same future. Chapter 22. After the interview ended, David followed me back to the hotel, inside the closed space of the elevator. There were only the two of us. He stood behind me, his gaze almost tangible. The elevator went directly to the top floor and the doors opened. I didn't turn around, but I could sense him following closely behind me. The soft carpet in the corridor absorbed our footsteps but amplified our breathing. David stepped forward quickly and slipped his fingers between mine without hesitation. Locking our hands together. How long will you be gone? 2 years. I didn't turn around but slowed my pace. He gently shook our clasped hands. My interview next month happens to be in Paris. I stopped walking and turned to look at him. Under the corridor lights, David's golden brown eyes were astonishingly beautiful. What a coincidence. I smiled. He leaned closer, sounding a little playful. You wouldn't stop me from pursuing my career, would you? I raised my hand and lightly tapped his chest. Don't cause trouble for me. It sounded like a warning, yet carried a tone of indulgence. David immediately grabbed my fingers, smiling brightly. I promise I'll behave. Before his words even finished, he lowered his head and captured my lips. It wasn't a brief kiss. It was deep and possessive, hot and urgent, until both of us were breathless before he finally pulled away. Inside the hotel room, the phone suddenly rang. David had just untied the ribbon at the back of my dress. His scattered kisses paused as he lifted his head from my neck. The phone. I didn't move. David took a deep breath, pulled my phone from my bag, glanced at the screen, and his lips immediately curled downward. He turned the screen toward me. Pablo. So noisy, I said. David hung up decisively. Then he turned back, trapping me between himself and the bed, his forehead pressed against mine. The phone rang again insistently. David clicked his tongue, pressed the speaker button, and shoved the phone into my hand. Meanwhile, he buried his face in my neck, his warm kisses spreading deliberately. On the other end, Pablo was obviously drunk, speaking incoherently. Wife, today's my birthday. Why aren't you at home? A sharp sting came from my neck. David had bitten me. I tried to remain calm, but my voice came out slightly hoarse, annoyed. I grabbed David's hair and pulled his head up. On the other end, Pablo was still drunkenly mumbling. Julia, I miss you. I really know I was wrong. I interrupted his drunken confession. Pablo, what you should be celebrating isn't a birthday. It should be a death anniversary. The drunken rambling on the other end stopped instantly. David also froze. He looked up at me, his gaze burning, unable to suppress the smile at the corner of his lips. I gave Pablo no further chance. I hung up directly and dragged every one of his contacts into the blacklist. Clean and decisive. After finishing all that, I kicked David lightly in the leg. Are you a dog? Why are you biting so hard? David unexpectedly kicked off the bed, looked up. His eyes were slightly red, probably from excitement. I felt speechless. Go take a shower. You smell like a dog. David grabbed my calf and bit it again, this time gently. Then he lowered his head and rubbed his forehead against my knee. Then don't lock the door. As he reached the bathroom door, he turned back again. For the apartment in Paris, can I live next door? I kicked off my high heels and glanced at him. That depends on your performance tonight. David's eyes lit up instantly and he almost bounced into the bathroom. The sound of running water began. I rubbed the bite mark on my neck and walked to the window, looking out at the dazzling lights of the city. The road ahead was still long, but the scenery would probably be worth it.